Hi there, this is Kyle and Travis with BeyondBipolarBlog.com, and we are a vlog channel that talks about mental health, education, and support. So thank you for joining us today. So we have a serious topic that we want to talk about. There's a lot of things going on in the news, and what I've been hearing frequently is the topic of suicide. So what we want to talk about is that topic, which is a difficult topic to talk about, which is mental health and suicide. And my girlfriend Nancy actually shown me some tragic news about this adopted Thai/Burmese girl that was adopted basically by a Hmong family. And as you know, us being Korean adoptees, it kind of hit me, and I was kind of affected by the news as well, even though I'm Korean. But it kind of reminded me of our situation with Hmong people, and I wanted to share a little bit of my story about that as we go on here. But anyway, her name again is Molly Chang, and she basically drowned her 3 kids in a lake at Vadnais Heights here locally in Minnesota, which is extremely sad. However, there was a post about her that was kind of alluding that even though we're placing mainly all the blame and maybe our hatred and maybe misunderstanding towards the mom, there may be a little bit of clues that we actually need to be aware about, which I think could be totally true based off my experience and her own experiences. So I'll tell you a little bit about the story. So she was married to an actual Hmong man named Kos Lee, and apparently it was a really bad relationship or marriage. He would threaten her and control her by saying he would frequently commit suicide. And in the end, he actually ended up doing that, and he ended up shooting himself right in front of the wife, Molly Chang, and her 3 kids. So now there's a lot of drama with that, because apparently behind the story, Kos Lee's family was saying that there's cheating involved, whether that's true or not. Regardless, what really struck me is that in their words, they felt like the Hmong people, community, and culture is trapped in their traditional ways, where again, they're kind of like Koreans, where they're encapsulated by their bloodlines, and it's very patriarchal, meaning they're placing the blame mainly on the woman and not the guy that ended up killing himself, even though he wasn't that great of a guy. So another important factor about this story is mental health is not typically talked about or believed upon, especially in Asian Buddhist type cultures, especially the Hmong culture, which they actually practice shamanism, which believes in spirits. So they totally disregard scientific theories, if you want to call it that, like medicine and therapy, the typical chemical kind of stuff, which is another topic in itself about the pharmaceutical company and billion-dollar industry. But anyway, I guess I could express some compassion towards Molly Chang, because apparently after her parents who adopted her got divorced, the mom actually passed away, the dad pretty much disregarded the daughter, Molly Chang, and obviously she probably felt a sense of abandonment and loss. So basically she felt like she wasn't accepted by not her birth family, but also her adoptive family, which again, the Hmong culture typically believes in the bloodlines, and they really only want to help and have kids that are actually genetically related to them, because it's very strong in that. The Hmong culture, if you could call it, is very sexist. From my point of perspective, it's more gathered towards the men, and the women are supposed to be kind of controlled by the men. Granted, things are changing. So with Molly Chang, from what I've seen from the outside perspective, is basically she felt like no one would love her. And according to the article, she felt like no one else would love her after her husband committed suicide. And especially no one would love her kids. So she felt like she was saving the kids by killing herself and the kids, so they wouldn't have to suffer the rejection and abandonment by the quite harsh Hmong culture. But anyway, I don't know all the details. I briefly read it, but that was kind of the gist of it. it's a really sad predicament, and it's kind of crazy that she's actually a locally known person. And in fact, my girlfriend's sister-in-law actually knew her in real life, and apparently she is a tattoo artist or something, so she's quite well known in the community. So when I think about her being an adoptee and her basically not getting along with the Hmong culture as it's set in its ways, it reminds me of my own self 12 years ago when I dated a very traditional Hmong girl, and we just did not see eye to eye. From my perspective, I'll give some examples. The Hmong culture is very strict. Me being a person that had difficulty holding full-time work, I felt like I couldn't live up to what was expected of me. I worked at a Wells Fargo job for 2 months, and I pretty much just crashed and burned. I actually ran away. I went to Cub Foods, and my girlfriend and my family was very worried about me, that they actually had to call the cops, and I was basically trying to go homeless because I was that stressed out that I felt like I had to be miserable in this job, and I was getting unstable. Wouldn't say I was hearing voices, but I was definitely paranoid that I actually thought people were kind of talking crap about me, which tends to happen if I don't get sleep and I just get really irritable. And whether that's in a story in itself, I felt like this constant struggle between my masculine side and my feminine side, where I felt like I couldn't be the provider that I felt like they wanted. And another thing that I wanted to explain, where we always argued about, is they typically in the Hmong culture, you're not supposed to bring the opposite sex, i.e. a male, to a female's family's house. Otherwise, you're supposed to marry him right away. And her mom would always frequently call me constantly, and I thought that was harassment. And I got really annoyed because I remember there was one time where the mom actually called her a slut. Why are you being a slut hanging out? And at the time, I was actually really offended. So for the most part, I feel like my ex kind of gaslit me because she didn't really believe in my feelings. Granted, I couldn't change the culture. I couldn't accept what it is. She wanted me to be the bigger person. But I basically said, well, then how would you feel like if I call you a slut? And she got really offended by that, ironically. It's weird because a lot of the Hmong cultural things that were put against by her family, she gave them the benefit of the doubt. But when I pretended to do that to her, she said she felt like I could be better, which I was just trying to prove a point. But basically, she would call me all the time. I didn't feel comfortable with that relationship because I couldn't enjoy my time with her when she was at my own family's house, let alone my family was also going through other stuff. We had mental health issues ourselves. My brother was in and out of the hospital. My buddy ended up getting kicked out, so I was kind of stressed dealing with that. My dad and that. But I couldn't kind of see it from Molly Chang's perspective. Wow, the Hmong culture is extremely strict, and let alone they're not talking about mental health issues, which I could feel for the guy as well, Close Lee, because if he is mentally ill and he had insecurities about being a man, and if the Hmong culture wanted to put that on him without talking about it, they like to keep things secret, and just it's basically about reputation more than anything else than the actual person, what they feel inside. And you're supposed to keeping up with the Joneses images, and eventually you kind of imploded. So I kind of see him as a victim a little bit as well, but Molly Chang was definitely a victim. So imagine you're this non-Hmong person and being rejected, abandoned, not feeling the love that you deserved, and she felt like she didn't want to put her children through that. So it's unfortunate how things happen, but that was basically part of my story that tied with my first ex when I first came into the Hmong community. When I first met the Hmong community, I thought it was interesting because I met Hmong people the first time during college, and that's when we were reacquainted with Asian people. And I was thinking, wow, that's crazy. I was a little bit uncomfortable at the same time. I was intrigued by it because this is the first time I ever experienced being around a big Asian culture. And right now it's J4, and I remember that time when we went out with our friend who we went to college with. He invited us to J4, and that's when I had my first experience, and that's when I first met my ex at that time, which was one of my most painful experiences anyway. But anyway, more a little bit about that. I did not handle that breakup well. There's a lot of highs and lows. One thing about the culture that kind of also irked me is basically the women were meant to serve the men. And I remember there was times basically in the Hmong culture, you're supposed to have the men eat first while the women do all the work and the cooking and cleaning. And I just didn't feel comfortable with that, let alone I wasn't comfortable being around these elderly Hmong people that I couldn't even speak with anyway. So at the time when I broke up, I did not handle it well. I had my own abandonment, my own attachment issues, and I was not a very good person. I ended up making all these kind of ratchet, really horrible, crazy YouTube videos known as the Angry Asshole Asian Twin kind of series that was kind of talked about my life and our mental disabilities and how lowly and how mentally ill and crazy we were. We kind of used that as a crutch to gain views, which it did kind of get us views because ironically, I became known as that Korean crazy guy that was known in the Hmong community that hated Hmong people and hated his Hmong girlfriend and all that. Because I went like batshit insane. I was pretty crazy. I'm pretty sure somebody thought I would like kill someone, to be honest. Even though most of it was acted, a lot of it I felt like was still overacted. Part of it I found out was a joke, but we just went with it. My brother and I both went with it and we made these crazy ass videos. I think about it at this time, I don't know if I could do anything different. Maybe I do feel a little remorse, and throughout the 12 years I end up feeling pretty guilty about it, that I actually had to reach out to my first Hmong girlfriend, I guess you want to call her first love, and I had to seek her apology. And I've been having like these nightmares constantly about her, about me missing her, about me being with her, and it was just horrible, and I didn't know how to heal from that until my brother actually found her on Facebook, and I just randomly messaged her like in, I think earlier this February or March, and she managed to actually respond back to me, and she said, it's cool, you live and you learn. And I think after that I was able to heal and move on. But when I think about empathetically, or whatever you want to call it, if I think about how the things that Molly went through dealing with the Hmong community, I kind of related to it with my own difficulty when I was with the Hmong community. And I actually was angry at them for quite a bit of time because I felt like they ruined my relationship with my first girlfriend, and if they weren't traditional, maybe things would have been different. Maybe I would have been able to be with her, but I felt like her family and her ways was partly the way. But in the end, Maya was the one who actually supported the culture too, saying it's how the Hmong culture is, you can't do nothing about it. And knowing me, I always have to just say how it is, and that's how I pretty much became like that asshole that just says how it is without really considering people's feelings, unfortunately. But anyway, the way I began to heal from that is I actually dated other Hmong girls that had less of a traditional family structure. And the second one actually helped me heal from it because I thought her family was cool. They were actually more Americanized, if you call it. They had huge families, and we had parties, and it was actually really fun. And it actually really healed my negative aspect on how I view Hmong people in general. And now I just love being around Hmong people because they have all these big families, and I love to talk about their culture. And I feel like we're one-on-one of the same kind of coin at the same time. But I feel like times are changing. The kids are becoming more Americanized. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing, that people are not learning the language as much, unfortunately, the younger generation. So I feel like the older culture is kind of dying in a way. But I just wanted to just share this little story between Molly that, wow, maybe what she went through, I could have been that too. Maybe I would have killed myself too. I don't know. But I'm glad I didn't have kids because I don't know if I would be able to handle it with my mental instability. I feel like I grew out of it a little bit because I didn't really change. I just learned to adapt. I thought I was this loser that couldn't work, but I ended up having part-time gigs that were later in the day, and I managed to work my way up and even work full-time at a second shift job, and I was like pretty much functional. But it really was one of my biggest hurt and regret. She was my first love. I seen what she looks like now, and I'm glad that she's happy. I was actually really happy that I saw her at an anime con in 2018. She didn't acknowledge me at all at that time, but I was just really glad to see her doing well, ironically. So I feel like my feelings change. I'm no longer that crazy Asian guy with mental health issues that hates Hmong people. I actually think I respect Hmong people. I know they went through a difficult time being refugees. They were attacked and experienced genocide of their culture in China, and that's why they had to migrate from Thailand and Laos to America and other countries to flee from that horrible state. Now imagine if the generational trauma of going through that stress and fighting for your life. I'm sure they put that on their own kids, and their own kids unfortunately take the brunt of it, and some can't handle it, and like I couldn't. And right now it's kind of interesting because most of my girlfriends after who were less traditional kind of didn't like the Hmong culture at all. They didn't respect it at all. I mean, the past two did not even want to deal with the Hmong culture. That's how bad they were wounded. They feel like it's very sexist. They feel like it's very controlling. They care more about what's seen on the outside than on the inside. They don't talk about mental health issues. They blame it on spirits or demons and whatnot. And although you can't say what's right or wrong, you kind of have to respect how things are. But at the time, it definitely put me through a whirlwind of pain, I could say, and suffering. I'm sure it's kind of weird because I saw her at Hmong New Year's, the mom. I think she was kind of scared because I saw her brother there too, ironically, like a few years after. And that was really awkward. But I'm pretty sure she kind of feels sorry after seeing how I kept it all to myself and I literally exploded and become like this horrible, ugly human being. But in the end, I guess you do live and you learn. I'm glad to have peace of mind at that. And I think even right now with the girlfriend I'm dating now, she probably has more ill feelings of the Hmong culture than I do. She didn't want to go to J4, that was yesterday. So, but she did apologize for not wanting to go. She felt like it was selfish because her sister said that we should have went, just keep her mind off stuff. But anyway, I still wanted to respect her and whatnot. We still had a good time going to the Freedom Fair and having a good time. She made a bunch of food, so she still made it worthwhile. But anyway, is there anything else you think you have any input about the story, about being an adoptee, being on the outside looking in, about me and the relationship? Is there anything you could add?
I don't think I'm the appropriate person to actually do this with you. It's actually probably your girlfriend, because if Hmong people actually watch this, I think that there might be people that might be offended that you're kind of bashing their culture.
That's true.
So I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah, basically, I don't want to bash their culture. I feel like right now, I feel like I'm at peace with the Hmong community and how it is. And like I said, I've always been dating them. I've been around them. It's been cordial. I mean, it's been fun. I guess as an adoptee, growing up with a family that you're not even connected to, being forced into these relationships like aunt and uncles that aren't even your uncle, I guess I felt kind of jealous that these Hmong people actually had people that were actually their own family and that they actually could call them their family, where I didn't have that genetic marker, aside from my brother, that I felt very isolated and lonely, and I guess I was maybe jealous about that. But anyway, I don't know if my brother has anything to add. My girlfriend at the time does not want to talk about these issues, as she says she doesn't care, but I think it's an important issue to talk about. I wanted to wish the family of both Kosli and Molly Chang about the sad news, and this was just my perspective. And the next perspective I want to talk about is another politicized topic that I've been seeing in the news, is abortion. So if you want to listen to that, stay tuned. All right. If you like, please comment, share, subscribe. If you have any other input, especially Hmong community people, what do you feel like about this? Am I right? Am I wrong? Do you understand? You don't understand? You want more details? Feel free to message, as I like to have the dialogue and just learn and hear other people's perspectives. So please like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the bell button for future updates. Have a good one, bye, guys.